Chris, and she'll be sharing her screen and telling you a little bit about her company. And the way we'll do this is they have about 45 minutes of content, but they are welcoming questions throughout their presentation. So I'll be helping to share your questions with them, and then there'll be a few moments at the end that we can accept questions as well. So Chris, the microphone is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, everyone here, for the good work that you do in teaching our students. And I know especially at this time, it's a hard job, but certainly a rewarding one. So what we will be talking about today, let me forward here, is the economics of healthcare in a pandemic. And as Nancy said, my name is Chris Chmura. I'm the CEO and Chief Economist at Chmura Economics and Analytics. Brian Shelley is our Senior Strategist for Education. His background is in education. He was a former professor at Wake Forest University, and then he worked in Cleveland in the K-12 system, as well as Chesterfield County here in Virginia, which is a very large school system. So Brian will bring you a lot of insights on his half of the presentation. Just real quickly, for those of you who don't know us, we provide labor market data and analysis so that you, our clients, can make informed decisions so that your communities thrive. And in the case of you as teachers, more so on the side of making sure that you're teaching the curriculum that's going to enable your students to find jobs in your localities when they graduate. We started in 1998. We have offices in Cleveland, Ohio, and Richmond, Virginia. Both Brian and I are in Richmond. And we are about 40 economists, data scientists, statisticians who really care about helping your community, helping individuals grow and find good careers. We're driven by your satisfaction and success. We have a consulting side of the business, as well as our software, Jobseq. Some of you may even use it, and Brian will be showing you some data out of Jobseq. And then finally, what drives us every day is excellence. When we come in, we're really trying to give you the best data quality available, and on the consulting side, the best reports and information to help you make decisions. So with that, going straight to sort of the outline for today. First, I'll talk about the national economy, just a few slides. So typically across the globe, recession is defined as 2 consecutive declines in gross domestic product. So, but here in the US, we've got this business cycle dating committee within the National Bureau of Economic Research, and they look at all the monthly data. GDP is quarterly. They look at the monthly data and determine when a recession has started and when it ends. And it's sort of a long-standing joke. Typically, the NBER is, you know, actually this time the committee is made up of 4 men and 1 woman. They're academics, and they like to make sure that the data are exactly correct in terms of when the recession started. But typically the recession is over before they even declare that it started. But in this case, it was so clear that this economy just dropped off a cliff, and you'll see it on the next few slides, that the recession they declared started in February. We're expecting to see a rebound in 3rd quarter GDP. I'll show you some charts on that. In terms of employment coming back, it's much different than the quick rebound in GDP. That is more dependent on us getting a vaccine. So after I give you a brief overview of the US economy, then Brian will talk to you about the present and future of the healthcare industry in terms of jobs. So national overview. As I said, the NBER defines a recession. The gray shaded areas on these charts are recessions. And some of the data that they look at are here. They actually look at 7 or 8 other indicators as well. But you can see in terms of non-farm employment, when the virus started spreading, it dropped off a cliff. We were down more than 20 million jobs in just 1 month. It was a tremendous drop-off. And you can see we're now coming back, but the jobs have been slowing in terms of on a monthly basis. This is through September. On the other side here, you can see the income, and income jumped when we went into the recession. That's because the federal government provided additional unemployment insurance, $600 more than typical per week to people unemployed, and also provided money to families under the CARES Act. Consumption, which is spending by the consumer on goods and services, plummeted. And this is important because consumer spending makes up about 60 to 70% of GDP. So huge drop off, but then we're seeing a rebound that's even faster than many economists expected. So some good news there. Industrial production is the output or the output of manufacturing goods, utilities, and stone, oil, and that type of thing. And you can see again, it dropped precipitously as we went into this recession, and now it's coming back. But in none of these cases are we near levels where we were prior to the recession starting. Now here, GDP is the broadest indicator of economic activity. And here's first quarter decline, second quarter decline, about 27% annualized, the largest decline that we've ever seen. And the way that we economists talk about GDP could be a little bit misleading in that we annualize it. So we take the quarterly number and you not quite multiply it by 4, but almost that simple to say that if we continue to decline for that amount in 4 quarters, that's what it would be like. So in reality, the decline was only about 6% or so. But in any case, 27% annualized decline. And here for our forecast, we're looking for about a 21% annualized gain this third quarter. Those numbers will be coming out at the end of this month. So some economists have this as high as 30%, some as low as 16%. And then you see a year or so out, we're looking at the economy growing 5% or more. Anytime it's growing greater than 2 to 2.5% is considered very good growth. And here you see the last recession that was much longer. Sorry, let me go back. Much longer, but not nearly as sharp. So the one thing that economists agree with is that it's going to be sharp and short, but not sustained. And that's on the employment side. And the thing that's driving all of our forecasts is when are we going to see the vaccine? Because people don't feel safe going out now. This is a disease, a virus that spreads when people don't even know that they have it yet. So we really need to see that vaccine or better treatments before people start to get back in the economy and start to spend more like they had in the past. So typically, it'll take 5 to 10 years before a vaccine is created. In this case, we're seeing firms moving very quickly. We've got 9 vaccine candidates, at least in phase 3 trials in the US. 7 of them are being funded in part by the US. So typically, you're going to get the results of a trial, and you all know this since you're in the medical industry. You get the results of the trial, and then the pharmaceutical companies aren't going to be producing these vaccines until they know they've passed. And so early on when this started, we were looking at trial, getting results, and then 6 to 8 months later, we would see the vaccine. So under that first scenario, we would see the vaccine early 2021 become widely available in the second quarter of 2022. We have some more updated numbers that I'll give you on the next slide. But Health and Human Services, as well as Department of Defense, announced back early August or mid-August an agreement with Moderna to manufacture and deliver 100 million doses of the vaccine by year end. So the good news is here, if the Moderna vaccine proves to be a good vaccine, then the government has already paid them. They have been manufacturing it for the last month or so. And so we'll see those vaccines come much quicker to the economy and then or to individuals. And then also another big important piece that I'm sure you all know about is just the delivery and the distribution of it. And CDC said early September that they had started working to distribute the vaccine. So those are all good things that are happening in terms of getting us back to a normal economy. But now we're looking at employment. So when are we going to see employment get back to the pre-COVID levels? So what I've done here is we've indexed employment at the pre-COVID level, index of 100, And then as we go forward here, these are actual data. You see that at this point, employment had dropped off by 10%. So we have three paths here to look at in terms of when will we get back to pre-COVID levels. And our most likely is the orange. And in this case, we assume that we'll have a vaccine widely distributed by the second quarter of 2021, no further shutdowns. So then we'd see pre-COVID getting back to normal employment levels, or we'll see employment getting back to pre-COVID levels 2 to 3 quarters later. So end of 2021, early 2022. The slow scenario assumes that we have heightened infections, that we don't get a vaccine until the third quarter of 2022. And in that case, we wouldn't see employment to pre-COVID levels until 2023. And then the fast scenario here is one that appears unlikely at this point, that we get a vaccine widely distributed in the first quarter of 2021, and then employment at pre-COVID levels 2021. So now it varies by industry in terms of how fast are we going to see a decline, how fast are we going to come back. So let me show you a few of those before I turn this over to Brian. So here's the same type of chart in that we're showing you it indexed to when the employment is indexed to when the virus started to spread, previous to the virus spreading. And then we're looking at the major sectors in the economy. So we economists use something called NAICS code, North American Industry Classifications. So at the 2-digit level, it's the highest level of aggregation. So here, for example, in red, arts and entertainment, and you can see the decline of about 40%. And then you see us coming back in terms of employment, taking some time to get back to pre-COVID levels. In green, we're looking at accommodation and food services. And again, this is at the 2-digit level. So when we did this analysis, we actually did it at a more detailed level. So we would break out grocery stores versus restaurants, sit-down restaurants, fast food restaurants. And you could see the employment coming back more slowly and not getting quite to the pre-COVID levels for some time until the end of fourth quarter 2022, because some of these businesses are going out of business at this point, and you'll see it even worse with retail. And then the bluish one here, other services. So that would be things like salons, barbershops, photographers. And I'm going to flip ahead now. I'm taking out the largest declining industry so that you can see, more detail. And here in red now, we're looking at that other services. And then in green, we're looking at administration and support. So that would be things like supportive services for businesses such as landscaping, janitors. And then in blue, management of companies and enterprises. I'm sorry, in blue is retail trade. And notice retail trade never does get back, at least through this forecast period, to the previous levels. And that's because of the number of retailers that we've seen going out of business. And then one more slide in terms of the breaking out some industries. In red now, you're looking at education services. In green, we're looking at the information industry, so that would be computer related. But what I wanted you to especially see is purple, healthcare. So once we get to the pre-COVID levels, you continue to grow because of the demographics and the economy overall, and the baby boomers aging. So there's great demand for occupations in the healthcare industry, as you'll see more specifically when Brian pulls up some of his data. So I don't know about all of you, but it seems like the longer this goes on, the more worried we all seem to get, and it seems like we're never going to get out of this. So I read an article by Ken Budd of The Atlantic, who wrote it in early July, and the title was "COVID-19 Won't Change Us Forever." And so this is in here to encourage you somewhat. So some of the statistics he pointed to: within 3 years after 9/11, the airline industry set records for passengers. Remember the last pandemic was 1918? Remember what followed that? The Roaring 20s. In 1919, after the flu pandemic killed nearly 700,000 Americans, Major League Baseball set an attendance record. So those are all good things. We tend to rebuild after disasters. San Francisco earthquake, Chicago Great Fire of 1871, Warsaw, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. And then the last, it's an interesting article, a quick read, but one of the last things he brought up was, we all know about post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is something that's real, post-traumatic growth. There's studies on it that people thrive after enduring negative life events. And so I think these are some positive things that we should think about as we're trying to work through this pandemic over the next few months until we get a vaccine. So one thing I wanted to offer to all of you, we're economists here at Chmura, or many of us are, and so we put out a weekly economic update. A lot of our clients get copies of this, and so we're happy to add you to our list. If you want to let Nancy know, or you can email me, you can, or Google, and well, in some way, let me know, and we'll be glad to add you to this list. But it comes out every weekend. We look at some of the numbers that came out last week, numbers that are supposed to come out the next week, and what the expectations are. We highlight some of the data and explain what they mean, and then the Fed, have any of the Fed governors spoken, and what does that mean in terms of what are they saying about our economy, or what are they saying about interest rates. So overall, on the U.S. side, again, the economy was in good shape before we saw the coronavirus. We've seen a dramatic drop off. The GDP growth is going to come back quickly. In terms of employment, it's going to take some time to come. So now with that, let me turn it over to Brian to talk to you about healthcare jobs.
Okay, now I have figured out how to both speak so you can hear me and share my screen. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. It's fun for me because, as Chris said, most of us at Chmura are economists. I am the lone odd duck, who at least the lone odd duck that deals with education, was in education for 20 years prior to this, working on K-12 education issues, a lot of work with CTE at various districts I've been in. And so I always feel like when I'm talking to educators, I'm back on home turf. So I hope you enjoy what we have to say today, because just as Chris gave you some encouraging notes about the future of the economy in general, I have positive notes to say today about what's happening to the healthcare industry right now, what's happening to the jobs in the healthcare industry. Hint, they're growing, and they will continue to grow in the medium and long term as well. So you are very much preparing your students for jobs that will be plentiful in the future. And I hope you take great pride in that, and I hope you take great optimism in that. Right now, we know that healthcare professionals are getting back to work. So this shows the unemployment rate in healthcare occupations from April to August. And you can see up here in April, right when the unemployment rate was going through the roof for everybody, the unemployment rate for healthcare workers was not as high. It was at 8%, but 8% is still really high. And look at where we are here. We're back down to 4%. And so healthcare workers are getting back to work very quickly. There are very few people relative to the rest of the economy, very few people who are searching for jobs in healthcare right now that cannot get them. That kind of makes sense. We're in the middle of a pandemic and we need healthcare workers. And that's driving some positive positive in terms of having a job. You know, we certainly know the trauma that everyone who is working in healthcare right now is undergoing, and not to minimize that at all, but there are jobs for healthcare workers right now. And we see that some of the hardest hit occupations are starting to rebound. Specifically, ambulatory drivers and attendants had really high unemployment rates, so north of 20% in April. There's been a 32% reduction in their unemployment. Their unemployment rate is at about 14% right now, which is not great, but it's a lot better than it was in April. Medical assistants, there's been a 42% reduction in unemployment. And then with dental assistants, there's been a 45% reduction in employment. There are, I believe, 40,000 dental assistant jobs, if I have my numbers, if I'm recalling these off the top of my head correctly. There are only, quote unquote, 40,000 people who work as dental assistants who are unemployed right now. That's down from 70,000 in April. So, you know, it's cold comfort for those 40,000 who are still out of work. But the news is that across even the hardest hit occupations in medicine, things are starting to look a lot better and will continue to look better for them. We also have this thing that the healthcare industry is hiring again, right? We have this thing called Jobseq. It's our labor data software that you're going to see most of our information today drawn from. And it allows us to measure all the job posts in the United States pretty much. We pull from over 30,000 different job posting sites, from the big boys, where you would think the big job engines out there, to company sites, to individual, you know, to big company sites like Capital One or something like that, all the way down to small company sites. And what we do is we have over, I think it's like 20 million job postings right now that we deduplicate. And what this chart shows us is the hiring trends over the past 6 months. And you can see here, gray is 2019, blue is 2020. And so you can see here this gray line in April and May, when sort of coronavirus first hit us. You can see that 2020, we were hiring for a lot fewer healthcare workers than we were in 2019. There was a hiring gap. And that persisted throughout June and July, when the recession was really getting going, and we were still in a bit of a downward turn. But as things have started to look up for the broader economy, starting in July in Q3 here, we start to see, look at this. Now we're hiring more healthcare workers than we were at this time a year ago. And by some pretty significant margins here. You can see that for September 1st, it looked like there were about 30,000 more job postings out there in 2020 than 2019. So if you have friends that are out of work right now, tell them the good news is that we really have seen some rebound in the job postings that are out there. Jobs are starting to become available again, and that they're going to, we believe, continue to be available as the economy continues to grow, just like Chris talked about in the first part of our presentation. So that is the current picture. And the current picture is about as rosy for healthcare as it can be during a recession. Yes, like healthcare workers absolutely took a hit right now, but that sector is rebounding, and it's probably rebounding a little bit faster than the economy as a whole, as Chris sort of showed you in some of her slides. The really great news is that the future of healthcare jobs remains really bright. You guys should know that you are in the largest sector of the American economy. More jobs in healthcare and social assistance than in any other sector of the American economy. You will continue to be that way for the next 10 years. You're going to add in the next 10 years about 4 million more healthcare workers, so that 27 million people in total in the United States in 2030 will be working in healthcare, and that's about 7 to 8% of the population. So the jobs that you are preparing your students for will be there when they graduate. And the average healthcare worker makes $53,311 per year. So as you know, you're not just preparing them for careers, you're preparing them for careers that can sustain them and that their income can grow as they become more experienced in roles, and that, you know, if they end up as an average healthcare worker, they're going to have a very good life in front of them. So I wanted to show you some data from Jobseq. This is from our industry snapshot analytic, and this gives you the nitty-gritty of Chmura's proprietary data on what the current state of the economy is right now. So you can see that we have 22,648,000 people currently working in the healthcare industry. That's by far the largest in the United States. We've added almost 2 million of them over the last 5 years. And over the next 10 years, we're going to add about 4 million more healthcare jobs. And we're going to need 26 million people in healthcare, working in healthcare over the next 10 years. So again, great numbers for the growth in there. What you see here, right, is that you see our total job postings currently available for healthcare, again, available in our Jobseq software. And you can see that about 470,000 total job postings for healthcare associated occupations right now. Obviously, a lot of what you guys do is prepare your students to become nurses, and nursing remains the most requested job in among healthcare occupations. And you can see different types of nurses, pharmacy technicians, speech language pathologists. All of these have a lot of people want to hire a lot of people right now. So again, the job prospects are rapidly improving for our healthcare workers. You might be interested, what in the next 10 years is going to grow the fastest? When you start to talk to your students about what kind of areas are you going to be working in, right? You're going to be working in, this will show you where your students will be working, right? And you can see that home health care services will grow a great deal. Mental health is a huge growth area for the economy. It's going to grow by almost 7.1%. You can see that as the population ages, we're going to continue to need more and more people who work for the elderly and persons with disabilities. And you can see that the forecast for almost every industry in healthcare predicts really strong growth. So no matter what your students want to do, if they are your students and they are working in healthcare, they are really going to enjoy the benefits of a strong healthcare economy over the next 10 years, and indeed right now. Now, this, I think, is, I always, it's good to understand industry forecast, but my educator mind always goes to, okay, what kinds of things are my students going to be doing? What jobs are they going to be working in once they graduate? And what jobs should I be preparing my students for when I think about, assembling career fairs or getting apprenticeships or externships or anything like that, right? Well, you can see, right, these will be the highest growth occupations. These will be, and I should stress here, I'm looking at this annual growth column, and this gives a selection of the highest growing occupations, but pretty much over the next 10 years, almost any healthcare occupation that you can imagine is going to be growing in size and importance within the economy. So you can see some of the things that are emerging here: physician's assistants, speech language and pathologists, nurse practitioners, genetic counselors, physical therapists. All of these things, right, are projected to grow at almost 2% or more throughout the next 10 years. This, I think, is really interesting to educators always too, because I think it's also, we think in terms of where our students are going, but we also think in terms of what can I give them right now that will help them when they get onto the job market, right? And one of the things that our job posting data lets us do is it lets us see what certifications that employers are requiring. So for all healthcare occupations, right? What are the certifications that are most needed according to employers right now? Well, you can see sort of a list of some of them right now. Obviously, that we need a lot of nurses, we need them to become registered nurses. Basic life support is a hugely in-demand certification right now. Certification in CPR. So I always challenge educators when they see this stuff and they see what the popular certifications are is, and I know we have a lot of K-12 educators right here, so there's nothing you can do to help somebody. I mean, you can certainly prepare people to go into nursing programs and become that registered nurse, but it's not something that you can give them right away. Certification in Carter in CPR probably is though, right? And so it's something to think about, like which of these certifications can you help support your students with right now? We also look at hard skills. We look at soft skills too, but I'm only going to show you hard skills today that are in demand. What are the things that people are, that employers are looking for on the market right now? They're looking for understanding in health and wellness, nursing, critical care, patient care, Microsoft Office, right? And this one always strikes me because I just came out of a Google Suite school district, Chesterfield, Virginia. We had transitioned away from Microsoft largely for cost reasons, right? And because G Suite has some great functionality. But if very few, relatively speaking, employers request Google Suite, but they all request Microsoft Office. And what that would imply for me in the conversations that I've had with Chesterfield, Virginia, since I've left there, right, is that you can certainly teach students G Suite, right? They just have to understand how G Suite and Google Suite of products translates into Microsoft Office. So they need to understand how similar Google's word processor is to Microsoft Word, how similar Google Sheets are to Microsoft Excel, right? So that is something to keep in mind when you are working with your students, that any time you can spend with them getting spreadsheet skills, word processing skills, PowerPoint skills, is time that will help them once they get onto the job market. Before we open it up to questions here, I'd just like to point out that I know a lot of you are associated with your school districts and your states reply to Perkins 5. As part of Jobseq, we provide a Perkins 5 report. It is designed to provide all the local labor data you need for your comprehensive local needs assessment. So we have that report contains a lot of Jobseq projections for industry growth, for occupation growth, for career cluster growth. It'll tell what skills and certifications are most in demand in the current labor market. So if you are part of your district's Perkins 5 response team, I would really encourage you to reach out to me after this presentation and talk about how we might be able to help you. And with that, I think Chris and I are done our part of the presentation, and we would love to hear from you and any questions that you might have.
I know that, Brian, Peg from Delaware. Peg, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask him your question? I know it was related to nursing.
Right. So thank you for your presentation. I'm Peg from the First State. So in case so Nancy kind of gave it away and told you it was Delaware, but
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. So my question is there was a slide there where you showed the demand for certifications and you mentioned nursing. So I wasn't sure if that was really pointing towards the nursing license or if it was pointing towards a certification in a specialty area for licensed nurses already.
So in this case, with the numbers that I showed you, it is pointing towards general nursing licensure and becoming a nursing thing, becoming a registered nurse. Now, what I can tell you though is that we can run different queries with our and Jobseq subscribers can run different queries with our software, and that would let you get into what are the certifications within nursing that are most in demand right now. You can look at the top, you can select just to see who's hiring for registered nurses, and then you can see what are the top 100 certifications. So you can really start to see what programs within nursing are becoming popular and desired in the market as well.
But that slide was specifically pointing towards a licensure, not a certification.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
And to add on to what Brian said there, a lot of the data that he was showing is at the national level, but our Jobseq users have the capability to go down to counties, to zip codes. And in fact, you can draw a 30-minute radius or a drive time around your institution to see what the demand is around that, or how many job postings there are.
There's a question about certifications in the allied health fields. I know you mentioned, I think I remember seeing physical therapy and maybe medical technologist. Do you have that slide again?
Sure. Let me share my screen again.
This is Sandra from Georgia that's interested in hearing about that. And then this is a question for Chris and Brian while he's pulling that up. Some of the teachers are like, I want to show this to my students tomorrow. So will we be able to have your slide deck?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. Apparently they have a lesson on health professions tomorrow, and they want to have real-time data to show their students. Okay, this is for you, Sandra. You want to talk through that, Brian? Do you know the terminology allied? It's kind of like everything except for nursing and physicians, although sometimes physical therapists and pharmacists might not want to be in there, but take it away.
Yeah, so I think that what you see here, right, is you see that physical therapists are clearly in demand. Going further, I mean, yeah, they've got veterinary stuff in here. I've never understood why that's a different code. I think, so you guys know the terminology much better than I do, frankly. I'm not nearly as versed in healthcare terminology as you are. But what I can say is if you don't see something on this list, that does not mean that it's not growing. Again, right, pretty much every healthcare occupation that you can think of has a positive trajectory for growth over the next 10 years. And if you have specific occupations that you would like to look at, let me know and I can try to circle back with you after the webinar and get you the answer that you need. Yes, these are the highest growth occupations that we have identified. But I would say that, you know, without knowing too much about the allied health professions, I can say that they're almost certainly going to grow because every healthcare occupation is going to grow.
And just to add on, Brian, so some of you may not know SOC codes. Many of you are probably familiar with them, standard occupation classifications that the BLS creates. And they track about 820 occupations, but there may be an occupation that's an up and coming occupation that you'd like to know what is the demand out there. Like cyber, for example, is not an occupation, but clearly there's a lot of demand for it. So within our job postings, you can put in a keyword search cyber and pull open and find out how many job postings are there for cyber, which you'd be surprised how many are related to the medical field. Then also just to give you a little more background, on the last 5 columns, you see where it says annual average growth. That's annual average growth just due to the fact that the healthcare industry is growing. And the previous column, employment growth, so I'm looking at physicians, assistants, 36,000 are going to be needed over the next 10 years because of expansion, needing more. We're going to have more hospitals and doctors' offices. And then the column before that, transfers, you're going to have 56,000 people leaving healthcare, going to a different industry, but this exit is the most important to me. You're going to have about 21,000 physician assistants retiring that you're going to have to fill. So when we take all three of those together, we're looking at about 113 physician assistants that are needed over the next decade. And again, this is at the US, but within the tool, you can drill down to counties, MSAs, or drive time areas.
Okay, you see a question there? Do you want me to read it, or do you see the one from Edson Barton?
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was screen sharing. No, I will. I was just looking to see if I could get the chat up. Please guide us on the questions.
Okay, I'll be happy to. So it says, would OSHA, infection control, HIPAA, those are other certifications that our high school programs are able to give to their students prior to graduation. She's asking, would you recommend that?
Yes. I will also say that I think that, well, you know what? We'll take this opportunity and feel free to ask away for another question, maybe for Chris, but I can show you a little bit in the background about how Jobseq works. And for example, I'll look up OSHA right now.
Okay. All right. Here's one. While you're looking that up, and did I interrupt you? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Nancy, that I saw someone, University of Hawaii, saying that we've seen a lot of cutbacks that's impacting us. We did a blog on states and how far states are related to the job postings and give you an idea of employment gains. Hawaii, and you could go to the blog if you do, you could go to our blog sheets. James Stinchcomb wrote this one, and you could drill down and look at your own state. But Hawaii has been hit harder than most other states. And of course it makes sense because of the, you have to fly there because of the tourism industry being so important. And so I could see why Hawaii in particular is having to see some significant cutbacks in some of what they're teaching, but which is very unfortunate because there's great demand for these healthcare occupations. Back to you, Brian.
So yeah, you can see, hopefully I can see how quickly we just did that, right? That throughout the United States, there are 3,200 ads right now that request OSHA 10, 2,056 that request OSHA 30, and then you have some others, you know, related certifications here, like OSHA 500 even. First aid certification, CPR, certified safety professionals, things that in our job ads are associated with OSHA. Not surprising that there are people that OSHA is an in-demand certification right now. And I would say that, yes, it's a fine thing to educate your students on.
Okay, here's a question from Edson Barton. Are you predicting for jobs in healthcare education? What are you predicting for jobs in health care education, considering how government revenues will decline this year? Historically, there's been a drop in education jobs after the start of a recession, even with the rebound in jobs educators support in a larger economy. If so, how long is the lag prior to education jobs returning? That was a long question. Did you get all that?
I did. Go ahead, Chris.
You were going to look up the labor demand. Look up go to wages or not.
Okay.
Go to economic development and then the economic development tab there at the top and go to. I'm sorry, I'm used to using there. Go to labor and wages and you could look it up there. I think part of that's going to depend on, are we going to get a stimulus number 3, and are they going to give some of that money to states and more to educators to support them as we go through this recession again? That was not because the economy was bad, but because we were asked to stay at home to help reduce the amount of deaths.
Chris, what am I looking for?
I think the education, and let's just look at local education maybe. Can we get down to, secondary education or K through 12 type? Elementary and secondary, that right down there. And now if you would slide so that we could see back through 2002.
Mhm. So you want to go 10-year?
Sure, or all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the issue, what happens is when you go through a recession, the state government is sort of the last to lay off because there's a lag with the tax revenues coming in. And so you can see in the last recession in terms of employment for elementary and secondary schools, you had at least a year and a half before you started to see employment coming back here in the US. So again, I'd expect to see that lag. The other thing is that we're really starting to see, and Brian has been working on a project here in Virginia where, you know, the manufacturers and some of the business people were saying 3 months, 6 months, we can handle it. We don't have to train people. We can gut it out. But now that we're seeing this is going to be another year, we're going to see some transformative things happening in education to be able to do it remotely. And so I think that's also going to play a part here. How much transformation that's long lasting will we see in the school systems? Brian, did you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
Okay, there's a question from Shannon about any projection on biotechnologist or information technologist. I know that there was a demand for medical technologist on your slide, and then there was a demand, but then there was a drop in when you were doing all the groupings of occupations for information technology had dropped, but I think it was on the back on the upswing.
So let's look at biotechnicians and see how they're doing. 10-year projection. And so biotechnicians in Richmond, at least, right? That has been a fast growing area in the last 5 years, as you guys probably know, that people have been looking for it. Don't see quite as much growth here, but even just in the Richmond metropolitan area, we're going to need about 325 of those. If I take those out to the US level, you can see that in general, and it's important to know that we can do this for your region specifically. We have, you know, pretty much as small down as you would think you could go. We're going to need about 90,000 biotechnicians over the next 10 years. So I would say that although the growth rate here is not quite as much, if you're preparing students to be biotechnicians, yes, the forecast looks good for them.
Yeah, but it's interesting, Brian, in Richmond, the growth rate was less. The bottom line is for all occupations, 0.5 in the US. So in Richmond, it was less than the overall growth rate, but here for the US overall, it's just a tiny bit faster.
There's a question, Brian, maybe it's in this same area where you are, about projections for healthcare administration or healthcare management.
Sure.
And this is coming from Stratford University, which is in Virginia.
Hello, Stratford. Chris, do you have an occupation code or class that you think might work there?
I think in that case, I might go to RTI and do a keyword search. So instead of looking at a forecast, we could at least see where what the demand is now in Virginia.
Okay, so let's go healthcare administration. Did I spell that right? It looks like I did. Yeah, we'll do it in Richmond. Actually, no, I've got, Strayer, we'll go, yeah, we'll go
Okay.
Richmond.
Yeah.
Not right next door, but close
Oh,
enough
okay.
that you know what's happening. Yeah, so we have, here are, when I search on healthcare administration, maybe what happens if yeah, I'll just leave it here. You see a lot of registered nurses. You see this occupation code, medical and healthcare service managers, the coaches and scouts, and that you're seeing, what we're seeing here is we're seeing 895 total job postings just in the Richmond area that have healthcare administration in them. So people are hiring healthcare administrators right now. And
you can
my old employer is top
Hmm.
on the list for the Richmond area.
There were a couple of folks that were interested in the job demand for certified nursing assisting or assistants or aides, certified nursing assistants, because that is a credential that we're able to provide from a secondary program.
How about, here we go.
Yeah, that's good.
So good. This is the Richmond area right now, and we're hiring 570 of those just in Richmond. You can see we've got some orderly here, but 563 just nursing assistants, if that's what you're interested in. And again, you can see here, right? You can see when you get into searching on a specific job, you can see that it will give you very good information on these are the certifications that skills that employers want to see their nursing assistants have, and that these are the hard skills. Always the ability to lift something, right? But also patient care, long-term care skills, medical administration, and so on down the line. So if you're thinking about whether your program is aligned to those jobs, you can start to think about to what extent your curriculum reflects these certifications and hard skills that employers are asking for.
Okay, there were a couple of more questions. We have about 3 more minutes, and we want to be respectful of your time. People ask if contact tracers were showing up yet.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And then telehealth support, telehealth technicians or clerks.
I believe we did a blog on contact tracers. If you go to chmuraecon.com and then look at our
Sure.
blogs. I can't remember who wrote it.
Yeah, that wasn't the search. I think, was it?
Contact.
Blog. So yeah, I will find this if you want to ask another question,
Okay.
and I will drop it in the chat.
All right. You see, all the way back, I didn't want anyone to feel slighted, but Fred had asked about, are there any equity, diversity, minority component to the forecasted job market over the next 5 to 10 years?
Do we break out ethnicity and the like? We do look at it for the occupations historically, so that, for example, you can pull open a particular occupation in say, for example, Jacksonville, Florida, and look at the ethnicity and some other indicators, education level, etc., and it will be much different than what we see in Richmond, Virginia, or in Boston. So we do have that information pulled out, and we have, I believe, population forecasts, but not occupation forecasts by ethnicity. And here's the blog.
Okay, good. And then Brian also put that in the chat there. Your website, they're asking for it, is chmuraecon.com.
Correct.
Okay, I just put it out there for everyone. And I know someone asked about athletic training way back. I don't know if they're still with us, but Brian, if you have a second to look up.
Sure.
Thanks, Brian. Brian also put the link there. athletic training. So I know that some of you are very interested in this information, and that makes me so happy because I thought I was the only nerd that thought this was the coolest information ever. And so I appreciate you being here. We have recorded this. It's going to be a part of our National Health Science Conference. So it's going to be one of the breakout sessions that'll be available to those who come to the conference for, and they have access to that information for 30 days. However, those of you who are still on the call and are very, very interested in this, I would send you the link directly to be able to watch this. So if you would email me, there's 3 things that you can email me about. You can email me if you're interested in the slide deck, and I'll get that back out to you. You can email me if you're interested in this recording, and you can email me if you need a certificate of participation for 1 hour of professional development. I know some of you need that for your recertifications or to document your professional development over the years. So you have my email because I emailed you all an hour, well, actually 2 hours ago now, to tell you that we were about to start. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Brian because I know he was going to say something about athletic training.
Sure. Well, so athletic training does very well in Richmond, Virginia. That you can see that it has actually over the last 5 years grown quite a bit. It's still a small profession, obviously, but that over the next 10 years, we're going to need 113 new athletic trainers just in the Richmond area.
Is there a way to find this national?
Sure.
Yeah.
In Oregon, we're very much hiring, not in the traditional sense, not necessarily with professional or collegiate teams. Those aren't changing. High school isn't really changing that much. But in the healthcare, other settings, they can't get enough of us. So I just wondered if that was across the board or just here.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
Jill. Jill, I think after COVID and everyone's sitting at home and eating, it's even going to be in greater demand.
So
Sorry,
you
go
can,
ahead, Brian.
You can see, Jill, that there, I did real quick for the state of Oregon, and it shows you what you already know, right? You talked about sort of the growth and demand for your services, and you see that over the last 5 years that it's been growing at 4%, and that growth will continue, maybe not quite as quick, but certainly 1.8% growth over the next 10 years, and needing probably at least 238 new athletic trainers is good. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay. Well, we can't thank you enough, Chris and Brian. Chris, all the information about the vaccine and how that's going to affect this economy coming back. And then Brian, it was just, I know you were comfortable being around all these educators. We could just feel it, that you were at home again. So I look forward to receiving the slide deck and helping you out as educators with the certificate and the recording, if that's helpful to you. So with that, unless Chris and Brian have anything else to share.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy, for the opportunity, and best wishes to everyone. Please stay safe.
Yeah,
Okay.
and please don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can help. Nancy has our contact information, and yeah, we're thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Be
you.
safe, everyone, and be good to everyone around you.